Now, shall we begin?
And hello everybody, and welcome to the Movie Pit Podcast. I am your host, Christian, and this is of course the podcast where we talk about all the noteworthy big movie news items that have come out this week. We also talk about the trailers that are out this week, and we'll talk about the movies that are out in theaters for all your viewing pleasures this weekend. But before we get to all that, something that's becoming a bit of a broken record here, I want to apologize. This last month of May has been, it's kind of been all over the place for me personally, and it's affected the podcast. Obviously, the last 2 weeks, there's been no podcast. If you follow the Twitter account, which is Movie Pit Podcast, there'll be a link down below in the description / show notes area if you want to go check that out. And I believe I also put it up on the Facebook page, which is facebook.com/moviepits. Again, there is a link down to that in the description / show notes area. I mentioned there that I had 2 weeks ago I had been sick, and I had flu, and obviously there was no way that I was gonna do a podcast when I was sick. But last week I was feeling better. Memorial Day weekend. Hopefully all you had a great Memorial Day weekend as well, and a great week so far this week. Obviously the shortened week, but last week I still had a nagging cough, and there was obviously no way to do a podcast with a nagging cough. I mean, I could have done a podcast, but it would have been really difficult to edit, stopping every minute or so with a cough every now and then. So I didn't want to do that. So I apologize for that. It looks right now, everything looks like it's smooth sailing. I probably shouldn't say that because I probably just jinxed it, but it looks like everything's smooth sailing from here. Podcast wise, the episodes will be going back up every Friday, and we're on the road to episode 100 on the podcast, which for me is mind-boggling that is even happening, and the fact that there's people out there who have listened to any of my podcasts. Whether you're listening from the very beginning all the way up till now, or you joined halfway through, or you're just a brand new listener to this podcast, this episode, I should say, welcome, first of all, hello. But 100 podcasts, we're on the road to that, and that's kind of crazy. So, but yeah, I just want to apologize. You know, we all know life gets in the way sometimes of things we really want to do, and so I want to apologize again profusely why there's been no podcast. This month of May has been just, I think we're not even in May. We're not even in May anymore. We're in June now. So May was just a terrible month for the podcast, because I think there was only one podcast in May, which is ridiculous, and I'm sorry for that. So I'm going to try to fix that this month, I should say, with June, and hopefully we'll have a podcast every week here in June, maybe even some additional podcasts. That is the hope anyway, especially with episode 100 right around the corner. All right, enough of that, enough of my rambling on that. Let's get to the podcast, and like I mentioned at the beginning, here we talk about all the big noteworthy news items that came out this week, and obviously the last 2 weeks there's been a lot of movie news. Of course, this week, the week I come back, it was kind of a slow week. I mean, there are some big movie news items we're going to talk about, some things we're going to get into, but compared to the last 2 weeks, it's been kind of slow. It kind of upped up a little bit near the end of the week, but it's been just a little tiny bit slow. All right, so I'm not going to talk about all the movie news items. Again, if you're new to the podcast, or again, I've been away for so long, maybe you just forgot how this podcast works. I usually bring up the movie news items that come out after the podcast goes up, or when I'm editing and I'm already so far gone and I'm like, I don't want to do it anymore. But yeah, I always kind of talk about the big noteworthy news items that come out after the podcast went up. I'm only going to talk about 2 movie news items that came out within the 2 weeks that I was gone, and coincidentally both of them came out last week. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Jake Gyllenhaal. Now, Jake Gyllenhaal is in talks for the villain role in the Spider-Man Homecoming sequel. A report from The Hollywood Reporter says that Gyllenhaal is in talks to play the villain Mysterio in the Untitled sequel, and in addition to that, Variety then reported that Michael Keaton will return to play the Vulture. Now, for those unfamiliar with the character of Mysterio, Mysterio is also known as Quentin Beck, a special effects wizard and stuntman who worked in Hollywood trying to make a name for himself, and eventually he saw that he was going nowhere and decided to turn his abilities into villainy and fought Spider-Man on many, many occasions, and he also so happens to be one of Spider-Man's oldest villains in the comics, and somehow has never appeared on the big screen. Now, as for Gyllenhaal's casting, it's a pretty big get for the studio, and one that's a pretty big move moving forward if they do indeed sign Gyllenhaal to a potential, maybe multiple film contract, if they're still going to go with their Sinister Six idea. In addition to that, bringing back Keaton for a Vulture movie is an interesting move, and one that I think many fans are eager to see how it plays out in film. It was kind of teased a little bit in Spider-Man Homecoming, so seeing him return is a nice surprise, and also very welcoming surprise for a lot of us. So the Untitled sequel to Spider-Man Homecoming will start filming this year because it has a release date for July 5th of next year. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Obviously, if Gyllenhaal joins, we can put that long-rumored casting of Jake Gyllenhaal as the new Batman to the side, although we have a little update on that movie as well. We'll get to that, of course, when we get to this week's movie news items, which is a little bit later in the podcast. Alright, so that's the first one. The second news item I want to talk about that came out last week. I believe this actually came out 2 weeks ago over the weekend. This came out last weekend. Sorry. It came out during the weekend, which is it always kind of messes me up. Anyway, James Mangold, the director and writer of Logan and 310 to Yuma, which we haven't seen 310 to Yuma, I highly recommend that, and The Wolverine, is gonna write and direct a Boba Fett movie. That's right, a Boba Fett movie. So Solo, A Star Wars Story is out in theaters now. Bit of a disappointment, sort of, I guess, financially. I think people were looking to see that movie make a lot more money at the box office, which it didn't. But Lucasfilm is looking for their new standalone spin-off movie, and it looks like they landed on the much-rumored Solo movie for the fan-favorite bounty hunter Boba Fett. The Hollywood Reporter reports that James Mangold will co-write at least a little bit of an update to the story a little bit. Will co-write and direct the movie centered on the bounty hunter Boba Fett. In addition to that, and this is a little bit of the update that occurred. Mega producer Simon Kinburn, the producer for the X-Men franchise, including Logan, so he's worked. And Wolverine, so he's worked with James Mangold in the past. He also produced The Martian, is attached to co-write the script with Mangold and produce the movie as well. However, details on what the movie will be about are being kept under wraps, but we can assume, considering that Solo, A Star Wars Story, and Rogue One, A Star Wars Story have been prequels, that maybe this will also be a prequel as well. Obviously, still early to tell, so we'll have to wait on that. The character was, of course, introduced in Empire Strikes Back, and briefly appeared in Return of the Jedi before his much talked about gag death, even though the comics tried to fix that a little bit as well. George Lucas then gave the character an origin story in the prequels, although it was only a subplot, and it was one that a lot of people weren't big fans of. So Lucasfilm only has one other standalone film in the works, and that is the Obi-Wan Kenobi movie. And that movie is still trying to actually get a director. I think there's a director in talks, but I did not write it down in my notes because I'm a dum-dum. But again, that's still in development at the moment. So I saw Solo. I had mixed feelings about it. I thought it was okay. Was it necessary? No. Was it entertaining? Yes, it was very entertaining. Once you get past the first act of the movie. There's a clear divide amongst the Star Wars fans about Solo. If you're a hardcore fan, you're kind of just... It feels like if you're a hardcore Star Wars fan, and I mean hardcore, like you read like all, like, or maybe not all of them, but you have a good knowledge of all the comics and the novels and play the video games and watch, Rebels and Clone Wars and everything, there's a clear divide between those fans and the fans who are just casual fans like I am, and maybe some others who have only seen the movies, who are somewhat familiar with everything else going out there, who are kind of split down the middle. Now I'm kind of split down the middle. I have not read all the books and comic books and novels and all the other stuff, but I am aware of them. I know a little bit of what happens within those. And there's this divide between those fans, those hardcore fans who don't like Solo, and then there's the divide of the fans who are not, big hardcore fans who are like, no, yeah, I enjoyed it. It was good. So you may fall in the middle like I am, where I'm just like, yeah, I mean, I can see why they wouldn't like it, but I can also see why the casual fans would. So it's a very divided. Obviously, if you've been online, you kind of know all what's going on with that. So I'm in the middle. I'm in the middle. As for a Boba Fett movie, you got James Mangold attached. That's already a step in the right direction for me. So we'll see how that turns out. All right. So those are just the two big ones that I wanted to point out and talk about for the movie news items that I missed from the podcast that I missed. So let's move on to the next segment of this podcast, which is trailer talk.
Coming soon to theaters.
Alright, so we have a trailer here, first trailer for the new STX Entertainment film, which is an action drama espionage revenge movie. Yes, it is all those things. That's how it was labeled in a lot of reports. It's basically a revenge movie. Just call it an action revenge movie. It is called Peppermint, and it stars Jennifer Garner. The movie has Garner star as Riley North, a mother who wakes up from a coma and learns that her husband and daughter have been killed in a shootout. When she finds out that the justice system has shielded the murderers because they're part of a cartel, she spends years becoming an unstoppable force and starts to take vengeance into her own hands. The movie is directed by Pierre Morel, who has directed District B13 and Taken, and the movie co-stars John Gallagher Jr., Method Man Juan Pablo Raba, and Richard Cabral, alongside John Ortiz as well. So the trailer is interesting. It kind of starts off, obviously if you're familiar with Jennifer Garner, you know that she's been doing a lot of comedies and family movies recently, and it kind of starts off that way a little bit at the beginning, and then it kind of goes downhill from there once you see, you don't see the shootout, but you see, the beginnings of it, and then it just kind of goes into this deep dive of her dealing with crooked lawyers and police officers and judges, and years pass in the movie, and obviously in the trailer, let's say the years passed, and it looks like she's taking all her revenge finally on the 5-year anniversary of their deaths, and she's just taking all these guys out, kind of just out of nowhere. She's probably she's in the skies at one point in the trailer, and she takes out 2 guys who kind of stop her, and she just straight out kills them. So it's an interesting trailer on one hand because everyone, since the trailer's been dropping, everyone's kind of been comparing it to like Taken, obviously because of Pierre Morel's direction, and John Wick because obviously it's a revenge movie, and now I think it's become the trend now. It's like, oh no, it's a revenge movie. No, it's got to be compared to John Wick and not other revenge movies that we've seen. So now everything is, at the John Wick level. And the movie isn't necessarily, it's not taking that John Wick style. It does seem like it's more grounded in its approach. She's not, unless they're saving like all like the crazy headshots for the movie and not showing them in the trailer. It's a more grounded approach to how they're approaching it. John Gallagher Jr., who is in the Newsroom, he was in 10 Cloverfield Lane. He's been in a bunch of other Hush. He's been in a bunch of other projects. He's a great actor. It looks like he's playing one of the detectives that's covering the case. And I actually talked to her, and he's kind of. He and his partner, I don't know who plays his partner in the movie, I kind of have this feeling that maybe it's her, and it looks like she's kind of becoming this hero amongst the community because she's starting to clean up the community. Jennifer Garner's character, so it's a rather interesting trailer, and it looks like maybe it could be an interesting movie. It does open on September 7th, so September's that first weekend after Labor Day, and that kind of weekend is always it's almost kind of been a holdover weekend. It's never really been a movie where a big movie drops, and there have been movies every now and then, every so often throughout the years, that a studio will drop a movie then so it can garner up that money, and it works some of the time. So it should be interesting to see how Peppermint is gets his audience, if there is an audience for that. Personally, for me, I think it's just great to see Jennifer Garner back in the action genre. Obviously, I think many people will probably remember Jennifer Garner from Alias, and that's how I first found out about Jennifer Garner. And she threw down on that show, and it looks like she's going back to her roots here. I don't mention Elektra because I refuse to, although I just did, and I feel bad about myself for doing that. But hopefully this turns out to be pretty cool. And that's it for trailer talk. All the trailers, as always, will be linked down below in the description/show notes area if you want to go check out those trailers yourselves. Let's move on to this week's movie news items. So very quickly, I'm just going to mention some of these movie news items. I don't have too much to say about them, so I'm just going to rattle them all off together. Dave Bautista has been cast in an action comedy, Dogtown, which is based off a comic book series by Jason Pearson. The series is set in the fictional city of Terminus, Georgia, and follows a father-daughter team of assassins, Mac Delgado, aka Clownface, and his overzealous teenage daughter Panda, who constantly seeks her father's respect and permission to go out on jobs with her father and his longtime body-bagging partner. So there is that. There's no director attached to that yet, but Dave Bautista is attached to that. Sylvester Stallone is set to produce a movie about boxer Jake Johnson. Sylvester Stallone is actually launching a new production banner called Balboa Productions, which is actually kind of cool. And the movie that will start off that production banner is about the now pardoned boxer Jake Johnson. Now, Johnson was the first African-American heavyweight champion and was convicted of violating the Mann Act in 1910 for transporting a woman across state lines for, quote, immoral purposes, end quote. Stallone has actually been a figure of trying to get Jake Johnson's and try to pardon him. Donald, our president, I guess, finally did that, and Stallone will now make a movie about him, and he's teaming up with MGM to produce the movie, but there's no word yet on when production will start on that. So there's that movie news item. Paramount is making a Creepy Crawlers movie. Yes, if you're a 90s kid, you probably remember those commercials. Neil H. Moretz, the producer behind Fast and the Furious and Goosebumps, is producing the movie with the CEO and chairman of Jack's Pacific, who own the rights to Creepy Crawlers. For those unfamiliar, the toy line allowed you to create creepy and slimy bugs with molds. The property has actually had an animated TV show in 1994, which I don't remember at all, but it was short-lived. Maybe that's what it was. Plot details on the movie are currently unknown, but considering the concept, it's probably a little hard to see where they'll take the movie itself. I don't know. And finally, James Marsden has joined the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. James Marsden, of course, currently starring in HBO's Westworld, has joined Paramount's live-action/animated hybrid movie, Sonic the Hedgehog. Jeff Flower will direct the movie. It's directed a lot of shorts in the meantime. Deadpool director Tim Miller will be executive producing the movie, and there's that name again, Neil H. Moretz from the Fast and Furious movies will be producing the movie as well. There's no word yet on who Marsden will play in the movie, but he does have experience with CGI/live-action hybrid movies, having appeared in the 2011 movie Hop. If you forgot about Hop, so did I. Didn't watch it, just forgot it existed. For those unfamiliar, Sonic the Hedgehog is, of course, a video game character that was launched all the way back in 1991, and fans have kept him in the spotlight since then. The games feature Sonic the Hedgehog, obviously hedgehog, a very fast hedgehog, on the quest to defeat Dr. Robotnik, a scientist who has imprisoned animals and robots and stolen magical chaos emeralds. There's a lot of history there, so if you want to read up on that, you can. This wouldn't be the first time that we see Sonic the Hedgehog on the big screen, and Sonic the Hedgehog does have a release date for next year on November 19th. So we may be hearing a little bit more about Sonic the Hedgehog in the future. So be prepared for that. Alright, so those are all the quick, dirty news items I want to talk about. Let's move on to the bigger movie news items. The first one we're going to start off this week is Maleficent 2. A synopsis has been revealed alongside a cast. The sequel to Disney's hit Maleficent has begun filming in the UK this week. In the announcement, they reveal the synopsis, the first synopsis for the movie, and who the main players of the cast are. Of course, Angelina Jolie is coming back to play Maleficent herself, as well as Elle Fanning, who is playing Princess Aurora. She played her in the first movie as well. She's coming back for that. The movie will be directed by Joachim Ronan, who directed, or co-directed, I should say, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man Tell No Tales. So there is that. Now it's announced who will also be returning. Sam Riley, who played Maleficent's aide, Duval. He will be, I think I pronounced his name right. He will be returning. The fairies, the three actresses who played the fairies in the first movie, Imelda Staunton, Juno Tempo, and Leslie Manville, they will also be returning. Again, assuming playing the fairies. New cast members include Ed Sheeran, who will be playing the villain, maybe one of the villains of the movie. He was the villain in Deadpool. He played Francis. Robert Lindsay and Chiwetel Ejiofor have also joined the movie as well, although their roles have yet to be revealed. Other new members include Harris Dickinson, who is replacing Brenton Thwaites as Prince Philip from the first movie. So we have a new Prince Philip in the movie, or at least a new actor playing Prince Philip in the movie. And Michelle Pfeiffer has joined the cast as well as a character named Queen Ingrid. So we don't know if she's going to be evil or not, but maybe we kind of know what she's going to play, especially considering the synopsis. So the synopsis reads like this: a fantasy adventure that picks up several years after Maleficent, in which audiences learned of the events that hardened the heart of Disney's most notorious villain and drove her to curse a baby Princess Aurora. Maleficent 2 continues to explore the complex relationship between the horned fairy and the soon-to-be queen as they form new alliances and face new adversaries in their struggle to protect the Moors and the magical creatures that reside within. Maleficent 2 does not have a release date at the moment, but if they already started filming, maybe a release date for a late 2019, maybe sometime in 2020. That seems fair enough. I highly doubt they'll wait till 2021 to release Maleficent 2, especially considering that Maleficent 2 made a lot of money for the studio. So, there you go. Zack Snyder, that's right, the director of Justice League and 300 and Dawn of the Dead remake. The Dawn of the Dead remake, I forgot a word in there. Zack Snyder has found his next directorial effort. So Zack Snyder's getting back behind the camera in a more smaller scale than maybe some expected. He is going to direct the adaptation of Ayn Rand's novel The Fountainhead. The book was published all the way back in 1943 and follows an individualistic young architect named Howard Roke, who makes the choice to struggle rather than compromise his artistic vision as he favors modern architecture over the establishment-supported traditional style. This was one of the projects that Snyder was eyeing. The other one was an Afghanistan war film called The Last Photograph, which was centered on a journalist and an ex-special ops soldier, I should say, who traveled to a war-torn Afghanistan to help a missing family member who has been kidnapped. So he was kind of eyeing those two projects, and this one, obviously, The Fountainhead, won out. The last time Snyder was behind the camera was for Justice League, which of course has some history behind it. Nonetheless, it's nice to see that Snyder is getting back behind the camera, and he's going the more smaller scale route as opposed to the full-blown big budget film that he's been doing for a while now. So it's nice to see him going back to a little bit of his roots. There's no word yet on when the production will begin, but the fact that he is now established that is going to be his next movie, I think says a lot about that, and maybe we'll be hearing a little bit more about the Fountainhead sooner than we think. Alright, so let's continue on the big movie news train. This one was rumored at first, and then got confirmed over the week. Jamie Foxx is set to play the new Spawn in, of course, the new Spawn movie. So the new adaptation will be written and directed by Spawn creator himself, Todd McFarlane, who is making his directorial debut, and he was actually the one that confirmed the news that Jamie Foxx was attached to the project. He will also produce the movie, and the movie will also be produced and distributed by, of course, the all-powerful Blumhouse Productions and its head, Jason Blum. For those unfamiliar with Spawn, his real name is Al Simmons. He is a former member of a CIA Black Ops unit that actually ended up betraying him and left him for dead, where he did die, and he was immediately sent to hell, and he makes a deal for his soul in order to return back to Earth so he can be with his wife again. However, when he returns, he is disfigured and his wife has moved on, and he is filled with all these supernatural powers of super strength and near immortality. I think he has the ability to teleport at one point, but Al takes the name Spawn, and he's actually caught in the middle of a war between heaven and hell with threats from both sides, including the Violator, who is a demon disguised as a clown. Now, obviously, if any of that sounds familiar to you, or if you're just a huge fan of the Spawn character, you know that there was already a movie in 1997 with Michael Jai White, who played Spawn, and John Leguizamo, who played the clown / the Violator. That movie didn't receive a lot of fanfare when it came out, and even to this day, a lot of fans aren't really huge fan of that movie, although they are a fan of the cape scene, but that's pretty much it. But the movie itself, there's not a lot of backing behind it. HBO even did a short-lived animated series that ran 3 seasons, which fans kind of seem to be more in line with that. But Spawn has always been this huge fan favorite character within, the fans who actually know who he is, and he has a lot of staying power, and not bad for a character that started all the way back in 1992 and doesn't come from Marvel or DC. It comes from Image Comics, so that's kind of cool. Now, as for Jamie Foxx, he has actually shown heavy interest in playing Spawn in the past, and as someone that McFarlane actually kept in mind when he was writing the script. So it looks like things all worked out for both parties involved. Now, McFarlane has promised a few things about the movie. One, he will stick with it to the small budget, and obviously that's why he went to Blumhouse, because he thinks that Spawn doesn't deserve a big budget movie, that it can be done on a small budget. And to Todd McFarlane's credit, he said if anyone's going to fuck up this character, it might as well be me, the guy who created him. So there's that. The movie will be rated R, and it will have a Jaws-like feeling, and it won't be an origin movie. So when you mention Jaws, I think a lot of people forget that the movie Jaws didn't actually have the shark character around a lot. He was always this threat that everyone always kind of talked about, and when you see him, obviously shit, went down. So I think that's what Tom McFarlane means, that yeah, it's gonna be called Spawn, and he's gonna be in it, but he's not gonna be in it a lot. So there is that, and of course Fox has a one comic book movie under his belt, Electro. He played Electro in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which I'm sure he wants to rectify his appearance in a comic book movie because that wasn't good. But yeah, so there's no release date yet for Spawn. It feels like the script is done. At least, they already started getting casting together with Jamie Foxx. So, I don't know when the movie will go into production. They haven't said anything officially. I think they were aiming maybe for this year or sometime next year. But regardless of that, there's no release date. We don't know what's going to go on. Now, I know the casting of Jamie Foxx has been kind of split. I know there's fans who are excited for this. I know there's fans who are not excited for this. I'm kind of in the middle. I've always kind of been attracted to the design of Spawn and the character. I haven't read enough Spawn to really call myself a full-blown fan. I like the design of him. I think the design of him is great. I think if they can obviously modernize that a little bit, effects-wise, it'd be cool. I mean, the Spawn suit in the old movie was pretty cool too, but obviously with better visual effects now, you can do a lot more cool stuff. So I don't know how Todd McFarlane's going to approach it. Obviously, he created the character. He wrote a lot of stories for the character. So, again, if anyone's going to fuck this up, like he said, it's going to be him. So we'll see how that turns out. As for Jamie Foxx, I mean, I'm not the biggest Jamie Foxx fan out there. I mean, you know, if he's given the right material, he's great. But I'm not jumping up and down, you know, having him attached to the project. If anything's going to attach me to the project, it's how it's going to look, as opposed to who's playing Spawn himself. So we'll see how this works out. Alright, let's move on to another comic book property, and one that's not doing so well at the moment. I promised myself I would stop talking about this movie until I saw a trailer. However, this is a big movie news item, and I couldn't avoid this anyway. The Crow reboot. The Crow reboot has lost its director and star. And at this point, I just assumed they would stop trying now, because it's just not going to happen. So, according to Deadline, the reboot of The Crow has hit, yes, another bump in the road, and it's a massive one. It's not a small one. It's not like, oh, our studio went bankrupt, so we got to go find another studio. No. This is you've lost two important figures in your movie. Director Corin Hardy, who has directed The Hollow, and star Jason Momoa have dropped out of the project just as filming was expected to start next month. That's right, they were going to start filming in 5 weeks. Also, the movie has a release date of October 11th of next year, which obviously now has to be dropped. So what happened this time? Well, according to Deadline, their sources say that Sony Pictures, who picked up the worldwide distribution rights last year and gave the movie a release date, are exiting that deal. And that didn't sit well with Davis Films and their head, Samuel Hadida, I think that's how you say his last name, who obviously owns the rights and is financing the film as well. But apparently, Hadida didn't close the deal either, and that led to Hardy and Momoa leaving because they were not happy with how things were working out over there. So the Crow reboot has had a lot of problems getting off the ground. This is just... Why is this even happening? So they've had rights issues, and at one point, again, like I mentioned briefly, Relatively Media, who held the rights before, they were getting ready to, start the movie. They were actually, Corin Hardy was actually attached at that point to direct still. And Relatively Media went through bankruptcy, and that's when they landed over at Sony Pictures. But it's just all of this, and that's just within the last couple years. The Crow reboot has had a long history of not keeping a director or its stars. So the Crow reboot has been in the works for a while now. How long? 2010. Let's rewind the clocks back all the way to 2010. Stephen Norrington, the director of Blade and the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, I had to give you one good movie and one bad movie, was attached to direct the movie with a script that was written by Nick Cave. Yes, that Nick Cave, the singer and the one who has actually written 2 films and written a few documentaries. He wrote The Proposition with Guy Pearce, and he also wrote Lawless with Tom Hardy and Shia LaBeouf and Jessica Chastain. They were at one point gonna do the movie. So they dropped out. And then Juan Carlos Fresnadillo came in. He directed 28 Weeks Later, and he's attached to direct Disney's live-action adaptation of The Sword and the Stone. He bore the director's chair with Bradley Cooper in talks to join. That didn't work out. And then F. Javier Gutierrez came on board. He directed Rings, last year. Very terrible movie, The Rings. I don't necessarily blame him, I blame the script. But he was attached, he came on board, he was attached to direct the movie, and he had a bunch of actors lined up. He had Tom Hiddleston lined up, he had James McAvoy lined up, he had Jack Houston lined up from Boardwalk Empire, and the Ben-Hur remake, the terrible Ben-Hur remake, but he was signed on at one point, and then Luke Evans came on board, and he was signed up into 2013. Luke Evans joined the project in 2013 before he dropped out, and then that's when Jack Houston came on board, and then he dropped out, and then Javier Gutierrez dropped out as well, and then that finally led to Corin Hardy coming in, joining the project, and then him convincing Jason Momoa, who had been rumored at that point, to come in, and they finally joined the project, and they were all happy, and then obviously all of this happened. It's a very muddy history, it's a very long history, and it's a history of people coming in and people coming out. So clearly, as you can tell, The Crow, again, has been in the works for a long time, and it's just been nothing but setbacks, and it's starting to look like this project is doomed to never happen, and I think some fans will probably be okay with that, because a lot of fans don't want this movie to be remade. Even with the promise from the creator of the comic, James O'Barr, coming out saying, no guys, it's going to be closer to the comics than the original 1994 movie. Because the original 1994 movie was not, I guess, from what I can remember, I haven't read a lot of Crow comics, but it took the bare bones of what the comic was, but it didn't follow the comic precisely, I guess. But this new movie was going to be closer to the comics than that one. And yeah, it just didn't work out. I'm a huge fan of the 1994 movie, like many others are. Of course, that one starred the late Brendan Lee, who unfortunately died making the movie. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't a huge fan of them attempting to remake The Crow. I wasn't, and it wasn't because I was against remakes. I think just because at one point I was like, okay, I guess if they get the right people involved, and then all of this started happening, I was like, you know what, just stop, because it's not gonna happen. It's either gonna happen and it's gonna suck, or it's not gonna happen. You're just gonna disappoint anyone who was maybe kind of excited for the movie to actually happen. So there you go. It looks like it's not happening at the moment. Who knows? We'll see, I guess. Don't feel too sorry, though, because Corin Hardy has The Nun coming out, which is one of the spin-offs for The Conjuring. That comes out, I believe, in September. And then, of course, Jason Momoa has Aquaman coming out at the end of the year in December. So they're going to be just fine. They don't need The Crow. The Crow probably needed them more than they needed The Crow. So they'll be just fine. So I'll keep an eye on that. But like I mentioned, I'm just going to stop mentioning The Crow movie news because it's not probably going to happen anymore. Alright, so we're going to stick to Sony Pictures a little bit with this little bit of news because this is a rare move. And this is something that usually doesn't happen very often. But the new Slender Man movie is being shopped around after the studio has some disputes with its producers. So Sony Pictures and the producers of the upcoming horror film Slender Man have been having some heated disagreements about the release strategy for their movie, which at the moment has a release date for late August. Now it looks like the movie is being shopped around quietly, although not so quietly anymore, to different studios, even Amazon and Netflix, and is leaving the movie a little bit of a limbo. So all this comes from Variety, from two insiders, who say that Sony sees the movie as a low-budget Blumhouse-style release, while producers on the movie have more confidence in the movie and are pushing the movie to be released across more screens. They also want a bigger marketing push, which will cost more money that Sony is willing to spend. This has led to producers triggering a clause in their contracts that allows them to, quote, solicit higher offers, end quote. Now that some studios, including Amazon and Netflix, have seen a nearly completed movie, apparently some of them are a bit skeptical about the potential the movie has. So Sony's Steve Bursich, I think that's how you pronounce his last name. He's the head of Screen Gems, the division overseeing Slender Man, because Screen Gems is owned by Sony, is a fan of the movie, and he wants the movie to be released, but the studio's brass, the big men on campus, is concerned about the social media backlash. Now, this backlash is going to happen either way, and this was something that I was going to mention when the movie finally came out, that the release of Slender Man was going to be a very big deal, because obviously the Wisconsin case of those two girls stabbing their supposed friend in the woods to, quote, please Slender Man is still in the news. I think it was, earlier this year, maybe even a couple months ago, or a few months ago, one of the girls was, finally sentenced, or something like that. I forgot what happened, but the case is still in the news. In fact, apparently, according to this report, some movie theaters close to where the stabbing took place in Wisconsin have said they're not going to show the movie at all. And there's even an online petition for the studio to pull the movie from its release date that has gained over 19,000 signatures so far. And it's probably going to get a little bit more, considering that this is now becoming a public story. And even the father of the girl who got stabbed, who surprisingly survived after I think she was stabbed 19 or 20 times, something ridiculous like that. And the fact that she survived is amazing. The father of that girl who got stabbed, when he found out about the movie being made, said that it was I think said it was distasteful or something like that. But I don't want to play devil's advocate, because obviously what happened is terrible, but the movie itself, and it should be noted about this, the movie itself is not about the stabbing. It is a completely fictional story that is not about the stabbing whatsoever. It is about the character and what the character makes you do and everything, but it is not about the stabbing itself, and that is apparently something that the two sides have been bumping heads over as well, because of how they should market this movie once it gets closer to the release date. And when they need to start marketing the movie, obviously, again, once you get close to the release date. And apparently, if the producers can't find another studio, Sony Pictures will be releasing the movie either way on its scheduled August 24th release date. So this is obviously, again, it's turning from one story to another, because you have the story of Slender Man and the producers not happy with what Sony wants to do. And certain people, obviously, over at Screen Gems are like, no, this movie will probably be a hit for us. Now, this movie, it's interesting because Slender Man was supposed to come out in May. It was supposed to come out, I think it was the third week in May. And it didn't come out. They pushed it back to late August. And I don't know why they pushed it back. I don't think there was anything specific about why they pushed it back. I can't remember at the time if there was or not, or maybe they need to do reshoots or something. I don't know, but they pushed it back to August 24th. I don't know how this movie is going to be received, because again, you have those people who are probably not as familiar with obviously the online movie world like I am, or any of you guys listening to this podcast, where they will know that the movie is not about the stabbing. If the movie was about the stabbing, then I would probably be on board with those people saying, yeah, this probably in poor taste. I mean, first of all, this case is still ongoing, and these girls these two young girls who, or they're not young girls anymore, they're teenagers now, who stabbed their supposed friend to please a character who is, for argument's sake, not real, is royally messed up. And the fact that you want to do a movie about that so close to it happening, and again, the fact that the case is still ongoing, would be in very bad taste. And I don't see a studio actually doing a movie like that. But again, if that was the case, I'd be like, you guys need to pump the brakes a little bit and realize what you're doing. But that is not the case. It is not about the stabbing. It is about the character. Now, remove that, and as hard as it's going to be, remove that from the equation. You have a Slender Man movie coming out in August. It's now June, very beginning of June. We've had one trailer that came out, and I think it came out like at the beginning of the year or late last year. We have one trailer that came out, and the trailer itself was not very good. So what's going on with there? I think you got like one or two posters, and you have the brand of Slender Man, which now has been a little bit tarnished because of this real life incident. And this movie is like 5 years too late. First of all, you really wanted to jump on the Slender Man train, you should have released this movie way back then, not now. So you have that against you. So it's just, on one hand, it's like, okay, it's like, yeah, oh, you have this real life thing, man. On the other hand, you have these producers who are now upset that the main company that is releasing their movie sees their movie as a low-budget Blumhouse-style release, which I don't necessarily see as a bad thing, because Blumhouse is doing pretty well for itself in the way it markets its movies and the way it's pushing itself out and its low budgetness and all that. So I don't know. Do they see that as an insult? Like, I don't get why they're like, no, we don't want you releasing our movie anymore. We're gonna shop it around. I don't know. I don't see why they would see it like the way. But again, this whole the Slender Man itself, the movie itself, and what's gonna happen around it was always gonna be a mess because of the real life incident. And two, again, you've only released one trailer. You've only released one trailer, and it wasn't very good. So I don't know what your whole deal is, but yeah, I don't know. It's a weird news item because you have so many layers to it. That's the problem with this movie news item. That's the problem why I can't wrap my head around it, because it's like, okay, it's like, no, yeah, I see, the marketing. Okay, yeah, it's gonna be a mess, but the producer's wanting out because the studio sees it as a low-budget Blumhouse-style release. That's, I don't know, that's kind of dumb. All right, let's move on to the final movie news item of the week, which is a rumor. I don't usually like ending the podcast on rumors, although I've done it in the past. But I didn't want to end the podcast on the Slender Man story. So the big rumor that's been going on, that came out this weekend, or last weekend, I should say, is that the Penguin will be the villain in the Batman movie. Now, with the DCEU constantly changing, I was debating about even talking about this, but considering it's, again, been somewhat slow news week, here we are. So, again, it's a rumor, so just take this as a grain of salt, but according to Variety's Justin Kroll on his Twitter account, he revealed that the Penguin could be the villain in the solo Batman film that's being directed by Matt Reeves, who of course directed the last two Planet of the Apes movies. Now, Kroll tweeted this out first, saying, quote, "Take this with a grain of salt as things are constantly changing in the DCU, but I'm hearing the Penguin is possibly the choice to play the main villain in the Batman. Sources add, even if Reeves decided to go another route, the studio could make him the main villain in BOP." End quote. And BOP, by the way, is Birds of Prey. He then went on to add this, saying, quote, "Reeves is still working on the script, so that could always change, but of the multiple Birds of Prey scripts submitted, one does have the Penguin as the main heavy. Either way, it seems Warner Brothers wants this character cast in the universe sooner rather than later." End quote. So there you go. Warner Brothers is going to add the Penguin in the near future as a villain, whether it's in the Batman movie or whether it's in the Birds of Prey movie. It's, yeah. And again, the DCU is constantly changing, so we can't get too excited about this rumor. And I honestly did not look at the reception of how this rumor was received. I did see some things. Some people were excited for it. Some people were not excited for it. But for me, it's hard to get excited or not excited because, again, the DCU is constantly changing. And with the idea that maybe they want to have the villain, they want him, the Penguin, to be the villain in the Batman movie. And if they don't use him in the Batman movie, then they're just going to stick him in the Birds of Prey movie. I don't know, it's hard to be, it's like, okay, so which one is it? Why would you even release this rumor if that was the case? So the last time, of course, we saw the Penguin was in the Tim Burton one, the 1992 Batman Returns, where he was played by Danny DeVito, where he was not the Penguin that we knew from the comics. He was another kind of character. But that being said, let's say this rumor is true. Who will they get to play the Penguin? Now, Josh Gad from Frozen fame has been kind of campaigning a little bit. He's always kind of trolling his fans about playing the Penguin for years. Will that actually happen? Who knows? Will Matt Reeves want to actually do Josh Gad a favor and be like, you know what? Come on, play the Penguin. But then there's the whole Jake Gyllenhaal thing, which we talked about very early in the podcast. Will they be going the Jake Gyllenhaal route now that he's cast in the Untitled sequel for Spider-Man Homecoming? Or will Jake Gyllenhaal be able to do both of them? And it still sounds like they're still working on the script. Now, there's a chance that maybe Jake Gyllenhaal will still get to play Batman. Because the Spider-Man Homecoming sequel starts filming this year, so he can film that, and then if he officially signs on, he's still in talks from the reports. So if he signs on to that and he does it, and they start filming the Batman next year, then maybe he can do both. Who knows? Or will they still keep Ben Affleck around to do the movie? We don't know anything about the Batman. We don't know if Ben Affleck is going to be the character. We don't know if they're actually going to go the younger route, because it seems, again, they're constantly changing stuff, and Matt Reeves is still working on the script, at least according to Justin Kroll's sources. But even with all that, we still have James Manganiello's Deathstroke out there. Now, Manganiello has been cast as the character for a while now, and he even appeared in a post-credit scene in Justice League. And there was, that report that came out a while ago that a Deathstroke movie was in the works with Gareth Evans, who directed the Raid movies, in talks to direct. So, what the hell's gonna, what? Is Deathstroke gonna be the main villain? Is he working with the Penguin? Is the Penguin working with Deathstroke? Are they not working together and they're just teaming up, like, at the end to face Batman? What? Or is Penguin not even going to be in the Batman movie, and he's going to go be the villain in the Birds of Prey movie? Who knows? I don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen because I don't even think Warner Brothers knows it's going to happen. Because, again, the DCU is constantly changing. The only thing we do know is that Aquaman's coming out in December. Hopefully, if they don't decide to jack that up. Shazam is filming at the moment, and that's going to come out maybe next year, or maybe, later, or the year after. We know that the Suicide Squad movie is still in development. There's the Birds of Prey movie that's probably the Harley Quinn spin-off. There's too many variables in the air. There's too many things in the air for the DCU and Warner Brothers. And now you want to add the Penguin in the mix? I would love to see the Penguin in the movie. I would love to see the Penguin in the DCU, but I just want the DCU to be a working universe. And this is the thing that frustrates me, because they have all these great characters, but they can't get their shit together. And that's what bothers me. I'm not a Marvel fanboy. I'm not. But it's kind of hard not to be a fan of the DCU when they keep doing this shit. And that's what's making it hard for me to even accept this rumor, if it is true, and even for me to get excited that the Penguin may be in the movies, whether it's in the Batman or the Birds of Prey, because it's like, okay, yeah, that's great, but is it actually happening? Because things are always changing. And of course, Batman alone has gone through a bunch of changes. obviously Deathstroke was supposed to be the villain, and that's when Ben Affleck was writing and directing the movie and starring in the movie and producing the movie, and then he took all those hats off and was like, no, I'm not directing anymore. I'll still write it though. Oh, you're not going to use my script? Okay, that's fine. I'll still star in it though. Maybe I'll want out. So it's hard to get excited for, even for rumors. And that's the sad part about the DCEU now. It's hard to get excited for rumors. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Alright, so that's all the movie news that I have for you guys this week, at least at the time of this recording. Obviously, the movie gods like to mess around with me when I'm editing, and they'll just throw down a big old news item when I'm editing or when it's already uploading, so we'll have to wait and see how that happens. But that's all the movie news items. Let's move on to this week's movie releases.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Alright, so we have 2 limited releases we're going to talk about this week. The first one is A Kid Like Jack. A Brooklyn couple has always known that their 4-year-old son is more interested in fairy tale princesses than toy cars. But when his preschool director points out that his gender non-conforming play may be more than a phase, the couple is forced to rethink their roles as parents and spouses. The film stars Claire Danes, Jim Parsons, Leo James Davis, Ann Dowd, and Octavia Spencer. I've been hearing some mixed things about the movie. Some of them, from what I've heard so far, have been fairly positive. I heard the acting in the movie is great, but the message is kind of a little bit muddled, but that's, obviously just some people's opinions. But A Kid Like Jack is getting a very limited release. It's not getting a huge release like the second limited release we're going to talk about right now, but if you have a chance to go watch that, then I highly recommend that. I have not seen it, just based off the buzz itself that I've been hearing. Just go watch it. So the second limited release we have this week is American Animals. A crime drama follows 4 young men who mistakenly think their lives are a movie and attempt one of the most audacious heists in U.S. history. I saw the trailer for this. I've heard about the project for a while now, but I had not seen the trailer until recently. And I saw the trailer, and I thought, what? I mean, it's just one of those trailers that kind of builds up to everything, and it's like, yeah, now I'm invested in what these characters are gonna do and what's gonna happen. So that trailer had a very big effect on me for that. The cast includes Evan Peters, Blake Jenner, Barry Begnahan, I think that's how you pronounce the last name. I kind of feel bad that I'm mispronouncing his last name. Ann Dowd, there you go. She's in 2 limited releases this week. And Udo Kier is also in the movie. So there you go. American Animals coming out in limited release this weekend. Let's move on to our wide releases. It's kind of a slow week this week. We have 3 wide releases, but all of them are kind of just, they're not, big old, big budget movies. They're kind of the smaller scale movies. So the first one is Action Point. A daredevil played by Johnny Knoxville designs and operates his own theme park with his friends. So if you're missing the Jackass in your life, the show, Action Point looks to be a valuable replacement for that. And just seeing the trailer itself, Knoxville is pulling out some crazy stunts here. I'm not really excited for the movie. I've seen that there was a point where I was going to the movies, and this trailer popped up in every movie I was watching. So there was like a straight month where I went to the movies and this trailer was playing in all those movies, and I eventually got tired of it. So maybe that's a problem, and that usually doesn't happen. It's usually I can watch a trailer over and over again, but for a movie that I'm not that excited for, and I keep seeing the trailer for it, I think that kind of dampened my excitement for Action Point. So there is that. Alright, so the next movie is Adrift, based on the true story of survival of young couples. The young couple here are Tatum Odham and Richard Sharp. Chance encounter leads them to first love and then on an adventure of a lifetime as they face catastrophic hurricanes in recorded history. The cast is led by Shailene Woodley and Sam Claflin from the Hunger Games movies. So I knew nothing about this true story and about these two individuals, Tammy Oldham and Richard Sharp. But apparently, there were real people who survived this catastrophe, pretty much. So it's a very scary story, especially if you're afraid of being lost in the ocean. I'm sure this movie will do you no favors, because the trailer itself is like, that's why I probably don't go boating. Because that's the problem I have, and that's why I don't go boating. The fear of being lost in the ocean. But I don't know where that came from. But I don't know. I mean, the movie itself, it looks okay. It's directed by Bautista. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce his name. The guy who directed Everest, the movie Everest, and I liked Everest for what it was. I don't know how Adrift is gonna do, but if you're interested in that, you got that. The one movie I am excited for this weekend is Upgrade, which is written and directed by Leigh Whannell, who wrote the first 3 Saw movies, and he's written all the Insidious movies, and he even I think he even directed the last one. I could be wrong about that. He has starred in all of them. He plays Specs, one of the 2 guys that help that help the. Oh my God, I forgot her name. Why did I forget her name? If you've seen the Insidious movies, you know what I'm talking about. That's gonna drive me crazy. Anyway, it is set in the near future where technology controls nearly all aspects of life. But when Gray, played by Logan Marshall Green from Prometheus and the short-lived Cinemax show Corey, a self-identified technophobe, has his world turned upside down. His only hope for revenge is an experimental computer chip implant called STEM. Now, I knew a little bit about this movie. I knew Whannell was directing it, and I heard some crazy things coming out from the film festival circuit. But when I saw the trailer, and I happened to see the red band trailer before I saw the green band trailer, and I usually do it the other way around if I end up watching both trailers. I usually watch the green band first, and then I watch the red band. But I ended up seeing the red band trailer first, and holy shit, did that blow me away. I saw the trailer, and the Upgrade went from a movie that was like, oh yeah, I know a little bit about it, maybe I'll go watch it, to no, I am watching this opening weekend because this looks absolutely crazy. And this is the one I'm excited for this weekend. I'm not gonna lie, this is the one I'm excited for this weekend. And it looks really cool. The technology they're using in the movie is great. It just looks like this gritty, grimy, low budget sci-fi movie with kind of a revenge tale thrown in there. So I'm excited for it. I really am. And I think Leigh Whannell going back a little bit to his low budget roots a little bit is nice to see. And having him write and direct this, it seems pretty cool. So I'm excited for Upgrade, if you couldn't tell. But yeah, those are your wide releases of the week. Upgrade, Adrift, and Action Point. And Upgrade, by the way, not getting a huge theater count. It is coming out in over 1,000 theaters, so that classifies it as a wide release. But compared to Adrift and Action Point, it's not getting a huge release. So just be aware of that when you go try to see movie times. And your limited releases this week are American Animals and A Kid Like Jack. And that's it. Those are your wide releases. Give you guys a little bit of a sneak peek. I don't know why I'm doing that, but not the sneak peek part, the other part. You know which part it was. So the sneak peek for next week, we have a documentary about a famed TV legend, a horror film by A24, a spin-off of a heist film series, and an action thriller set in the near future. Yes, another near future action thriller like Upgrade, but it's not Upgrade. It's got a bigger cast. Alright, so that's your sneak peek, and that's it, guys. That's all I have for you on the podcast this week. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week, and again, I want to apologize for not having a podcast the last 2 weeks, and that's it. I'm going to stop rambling. Everything you need is in the description/show notes area. Trailer links to the trailers that came out this week, like Peppermint. You have the Facebook link down there. I really appreciate if you guys give me a like. Basically, it gives you an early preview of work I talk about on the podcast. I put movie news items items up there that I don't talk about the podcast. There's even movie news items that I don't put on the Facebook page that I do talk about on the podcast. Of course, I go more into detail and give my thoughts more on the podcast than I do on the Facebook page. So there is that. There's also a link to the Twitter page. I try to update the Twitter page as much as I can. Getting better at that, I think, a little bit. So go follow me on Twitter if that's more your thing. What else is down there? My Instagram's down there. My WordPress is down there where I do all my spoiler-free written reviews. There will be a spoiler-free written review of Upgrade up this weekend. There is one up there currently for Solo, A Star Wars Story. There's also one up there for Deadpool 2. If you have not watched that yet, or if you did and you want to hear my opinions on that, there's that. What else? Anything else that you need down there will be down there. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast this week. I'm just going to stop rambling. Hopefully you have a good week. Have a good weekend. Have a safe weekend. And as always, go watch some movies.
Whoop whoop! Yeah! Give it up! Movies!